Welcome back to my humble basement abode. I bet you many of you didn't think you were going to make it to the final of this. You had to suffer through 11 chapters, the 12th and final chapter today for interpersonal communication, all about family. I imagine if we were in class and I said define family, many of you would have different definitions. Some of you think of family is strictly the closest blood relative. Others, on the other hand, think of family as extended family, grandparents, great grandparents, aunts, uncles, all those other people that are involved in family. And sometimes family is not blood relative. In the military, more often than not, your family is those people you're stationed with. Being overseas, away from home, away from family, we had people at our house all the time for celebrations like Christmas and Fourth of July and Thanksgiving and Easter, and we brought people in, and we were the family away from home, so to speak. Especially since I had wife and kids, and for the most part, when I was younger, I went to other people's houses and I was invited, and I carried on that tradition. So families are diverse. There's no one cookie cutter example of family. Family can be heterosexual, can be gay, can be racial diversity in a family. Family could be a single person with children. It could be a couple with children. It could be just a couple. It could be a couple with adopted children. In the olden days, before me, they had a breadwinner, which was generally the man, and the woman stayed at home and took care of the house. Now, with the economy the way it is, a lot of families can't make it on one income. So sometimes both of them are breadwinners. And other times, the woman is the breadwinner and he's the house husband. So, it's could be married, could just be living together. There is such a diversity that encompasses family if you look at it. So each of us have our own representation in our mind, but something we have to look at is in families. There's basically some goals to be. You get together, you create a family for reasons, strategic arrangements. When I was in the military, if you were married, you could have money to live off post, and there were some people that got married just so they could get an apartment. They weren't. Some of them were a couple, and they got married, and some of them got married on paper just so they could get the money and they'd move off post and each have their own room. I never did that, but some people do that. Some people create a family for reproduction purposes. They want to have children. Other people, a couple of good friends of mine over the years have been childless, whether it was by their choice, some of them it was, or some of them they just never had children. So reproduction is also a thing to create a family. Why do we have families? Because we want children. And then as a family, if you have children, your goals are to raise the offspring. Make them people that, for lack of a better word, you're proud of. I'm proud of all three of my kids. There was times that when we were raising them, and it's not like you have a book that you can follow. You don't know what the heck you're doing. And so, we combined how my wife was raised and how I was raised, and that's how we decided to raise our children. Some people want to have a family to enhance identity. Years ago, once again before my time, women used to go to college to get a MRS degree. And for those of you who don't understand that, they'd go to college to find a husband. And generally it was, somebody that had a future and had a lot of money or prospective for a lot of money. And so they want to enhance their identity. A lot of times, guys my age get a divorce and they get a young, attractive wife because they want to enhance their identity. And sometimes it's a family is a choice as opposed to a necessity. There are people that would prefer to be alone and have them, their only responsibilities to themselves. So there's a lot of different things that go into making a family and why families exist. Now let's talk about diversity, cultural diversity. I've told y'all numerous times, that culturally we're like a rubber band ball. We have all types of different layers. And the different layers that you could have is a different race. I have known and been friends with many couples that were of different races. Some black and white, some Asian and white, some Asian and black, different races, different nationalities. Of course, traveling the world, many of my friends found spouses in different countries. And so they have to create a family with different nationality backgrounds and different um, historical perspectives on family and different faiths. I've known people that were Jewish and Catholic and got married. I've known people that were Baptist and Jehovah's Witness that got married and created a family. And then when you have a family with a different faith background, you have the question of how are you going to, what faith are you going to raise the children in? Most that I know, I'm not saying all, but most that I know, kind of practice both. Neither one of them were really in depth in their religion, and so they would practice both. And when the children got older, the children chose which faith they wanted to follow. It's different for each group to get together. My brother married a Catholic girl, and so he had to become Catholic for them to get married in church. Um, my sister asked my mom. She said, "Well, did it bother you that Chris became Catholic?" And she said, "You didn't seem to care when you became Methodist because we were raised Southern Baptist." Mom said, "I don't care, what religion they are. They're all basically believing in and praying to the same God. So it doesn't matter to me." But a lot of people, their religion comes first. I've known many people that really like somebody, but they weren't Jewish or they weren't Catholic, and so their family wouldn't accept them. So different faiths create a whole nother level of communication in families. Now, families come in different types. Of course, traditional type of family is highly interdependent, emotionally expressive, and they have conventional views, and they often engage in conflict. Those of you that have heard the fairy tale, people fall in love, fall in love, and live happily ever after. That's a crock, okay? If you are in a family, there is conflict. If you are in a relationship, there is conflict. And how you handle that conflict often says whether or not the relationship will work. Independent family types are less interdependent. They are less conventional. They're more emotionally expressive. And they engage more in conflict and are more autonomous and have fewer commonalities. Many of you have probably heard the old saying that opposites attract. And, my wife and I come from completely different backgrounds, but we have made it this long. And at times, I think in the beginning we were pretty traditional, but as time goes on, I think we became more independent. There's things that I love to do and things that I love to eat, and she don't want to have any part of it. And there's things that she loves to do and loves to eat, and I don't want to have any part of it. So, we manage like that. And I think really that as a family unit, you grow and change over time. I think that's true with everybody. The third type the book talks about of family is separate, highly autonomous, share less emotionally, avoid conflict, and operate separately. What I thought of when I read this was the contract marriages basically that I saw in the Army. Legally they were a family. The Army looked at them as a family, but they were not interdependent. They were separate. They went on about their lives. They got married for convenience to have more money. So what happens in family communication? Well, there's different elements in any communication, and family takes on a different atmosphere, and really, I think every communication takes on a different atmosphere with the words that you use. You know, are you happy or unhappy? You know, are you supportive, agreement, understanding? You know, or do you criticize and are you negative and egocentric about things that you say? You know, how do you describe your life? How do you describe your family? You know, do you talk about being happy? Do you talk about being unhappy? And how you communicate those words to the other people, you know, and I keep bringing this up, but you remember the toothpaste? There it is. There. Remember the toothpaste? Um, you know, once the words come out, they ain't going back in. So, how you know how do you use what words do you use? What thoughts do you have of your family, satisfying or unsatisfying? You know, your thoughts actually shape your emotion. You have a choice to be positive or negative. You know, if you wake up, oh man, another day, this sucks. It's going to be a sucky day. You know, but if you wake up and say, you know, got another day, another chance, you know, yesterday's gone, I'm going to make the best of it, that will help shape your emotion. And emotions, how we feel is affected by what we say in our self-talk. You know, if you're positive about stuff, and I use this in public speaking all the time, you know, when I was young, we had pep rallies in school, and I imagine you did too, because my grandkids still have them. You never start the pep rally out by going, "We're gonna lose. This is bad." You know, you're always positive about it, and that sets your mindset, and it sets how you think about things, and how you can be successful. If you believe you can't do something, you're right, you can't. You know, if you tell yourself you can't, you can't. My mom used to always tell me, can't, never could do anything. So you have to self-talk in a positive way. Different dimensions of communication. Conversation orientation. Openness of communication. Is it deep or superficial? You know, how do you talk about things? Do you talk in depth about stuff with your family members? Or is it just, you know, over the top? And, you know, to be honest with you, it depends on the family member for me. You know, there's some of my family members that I can talk in depth about religion and politics and things like that. And others of my family, it just like rolls off right off the top of their head. They don't care. You know, I really enjoy political conversations. My wife doesn't. You know, so we can have a few, but more or less our political conversations are superficial because she doesn't get into it. But there's others in my family that I can have this great in-depth conversation with. The dimensions of your communication is conformity orientation. You know, does it follow the hierarchy? You know, and it changes over time. You know, when you're young, your parents are the hierarchy. Your parents are in charge. As you get older and you become more independent, you have the ability to make your own decisions, and you don't necessarily have to follow those ideas by your mom and dad. You know, I took my mom to lunch yesterday, and she said, "I'm paying." I said, "No, you're not." You know, when I was young, I could never tell my mom, "No, you're not." But, well, you know, you always pay. And I said, "Yeah, I'm paying. You know, I'm taking you to lunch." I said, let me ask you this question. Would Dad let his mom pay for lunch? No. I said, okay, well, yeah, you and Dad raised me. So, you know, now it's time. The hierarchy is changing. You know, Mom is 90 years old now. Although she's 90, I'm still afraid of her. But I stand my ground more, and the hierarchy in our family has changed. You know, when I was younger, when I was little, my big sister was my big sister, and she was bossy, and she told me what to do. And then when I got a little brother, I was bossy and told him what to do. But now things have changed. The hierarchy has changed. And the different patterns of communication. Consensual communication. It is high in conversation and high in conformity. And pluralistic communication is high in conversation and low in conformity. And then protective conversation is low conversation and low conformity. You know, think about that. You've been in relationships, I'm sure, with different people, and sometimes you're protective about what you say. You know, you're not getting in depth because you don't want to upset them, you don't want to make them mad. Um, you're just kind of going with the flow. And laissez-faire is low conversation and low conformity. It's, laissez-faire, laid back. It's French. And if you think about it with your family, I'm sure you will find that you use different patterns of communication with different people in your family. And families, basically, according to the text, there's a stages you go through in creating a family. First thing you have to do to establish your family is be in a committed relationship. That can be different things to different people. Some people, a committed relationship is a relationship that they always put the other person first in everything they do. I have known people that were in committed open relationships where each one of them went out and had some fun and played with other people, but they both knew about it, but their partner was always first. It's something I couldn't quite understand, but hey, they were adults, they did what they wanted to do. But they were committed to one another. You know, if one partner needed them for something, they were the priority. Enlarging the family. You know, you have children sometimes in a family, and the family grows. You know, when my wife and I got together, it was us two, and then we had three kids, and now I have two daughter-in-laws and a son-in-law, and now I have six grandkids with one on the way, five grandsons and a granddaughter and a grandson on the way. You know, it's bigger, and it's more complicated. But children and parenthood is difficult because when you become a parent, like I mentioned earlier, there's not a book to follow. You know, you're kind of winging it. You know, my mom raised me this way, my wife's mom raised her that way. My dad did this, her dad did that, and you have to kind of blend those together when you're raising your own children. Developing family is the next step. Parent-child relationship. You know, you have different relationships with your children, and they start growing into their own people and creating their own identities. And how do you treat them? I know I hung that damn phone up. Okay, it's the fax machine making noise. Sorry about that, folks. I apologize, but I'm not starting this whole video over again. Um, Children develop their own identities. I mean, think about it when you were a child. You know, you developed an identity of who you are over a period of time. And as parents, you have to deal with that identity and how the children develop. You always want them to have good identities and good this and good that, but a lot of times they don't turn out to be what you wanted them to be. Encourage independence. You know, you have to encourage your children to become independent. And it's hard at times, because you're always mom and dad. And, as much as, my children, my youngest will be 32 next week. And to me, she's still my baby. But I have to let her make her mistakes. And what I say is my mom and dad with me, they always gave me enough rope to hang myself, but they were always there to loosen the knot right before it was too late. You know, take care of me. And you want children to become independent. And it's like when they learn to ride a bicycle. You know they're going to fall down and get hurt, but you have to let them grow and start developing that independence. Uh, Adolescents, especially, and they're going to become more and more autonomous. Launching children, according to the textbook, one of my favorite parts of the chapter. Go away. Um, at some point in time, your children grow and they're going to want to leave. And part of you is not going to want them to go away. But on the other hand, part of you wants them to leave. They hopefully are independent. You've raised them well. They're autonomous. They have their own identity. It's time for them to go out in the world and make their own way. I'm not saying completely cut them off and ignore them and never have anything to do with them again. I'm saying that it's time for them to go on. And there's a saying, it's not in the textbook, at least I don't remember seeing it in there, is the empty nest. The empty nest is when the children leave home. The empty nest syndrome is what happens when the children leave home because your life has just suddenly changed. Instead of cooking for 4 people, now you're cooking for 2. Instead of knowing everybody was going to be there Christmas morning, you're with, are the kids going to be able to make it for Christmas? You know, they have their own spouses, they have their own things, they have their own jobs. So, post-launching is a difficult time for a relationship. Your marriage is often redefined. When there were 5 of us in this household, there was always something going on. Baseball and band and all this other stuff. And then when they grew up and they went away, and they don't live too far, so they're not too far away. But now it's my wife and I, and it's just the 2 of us in this big old house. So what do you do to manage your time? How do you? And when my dad retired, it drove my mom up the wall because he was always under her foot. Luckily I haven't retired completely yet. I did that for a few years, and then I went back to school. And I still have my little cubby hole down here where I teach class from, and I'm refinishing the basement, and I'm doing that type of stuff. But what do you do in post-launching? You redefine your identities. You're not mom and dad so much anymore. You're back to being husband and wife like when you first got married, but you're definitely not as young as you once were, and your priorities have changed. In retirement, excitement, boredom, freedom, unanchored. I haven't got to that point yet, really, but I've met a lot of people that look forward to retirement because they can travel and they can do things that they couldn't do when they had to go to work 9 to 5. I don't know. We'll see what happens with retirement for me. It's exciting to look forward to, but on the other hand, your health diminishes. In my particular case, about my eyes. My wife has dementia. I don't know what her retirement years are going to be like. So I'm really not looking forward to it, but a lot of people look forward to retirement. Social media, something that has enveloped our lives. You are lucky in many aspects that you grew up with it. I can remember when it first came out, and we'd be having dinner or something, and the computer would go ding, or you've got mail or whatever, and my wife would immediately go and see who it was, and it created some stress in our relationship because I didn't think she ought to be stopping what she was doing with us to go look at the computer. On the other hand, I'll sit there and thumb through my phone. I mentioned before that I realized I was ignoring her. My daughter and son-in-law were over at the house last night. We're all sitting around the kitchen table talking, and all of a sudden, everybody was scrolling on their phone. So social media definitely changes how families communicate. To improve your family, um, there's a few things that you need to do. You need to maintain equality. What's the cost and benefit of anything? I'm sure you've all heard that a marriage is 50-50. I think I've told you before that's bull. Sometimes it's 100 her and 0 me, sometimes it's 100 me and 0 her. It should average out to 50-50. What is the cost benefit of what's going on? I don't drive. Wednesday, I went to Rotary. I like to go to Rotary. My wife doesn't like to go. I can't drive into Rotary, so she drives me in. But her and my daughter go to lunch while I'm at lunch. So the cost benefit, she don't like to drive, but she gets to have lunch with my daughter, and it works out. Enhance intimacy. When over time you change. Try to find ways to sustain the closeness, build supportive climates to enhance one another. A simple, I love you out of the blue, it means a lot. Picking up your significant other's favorite meal means a lot. My wife loves lobster. So every now and then I just buy a lobster and surprise her. It's not just for her birthday or our anniversary. It's something I do just to try to sustain the closeness. Show respect and consideration. If you aren't respectful of your partner or of your family, there's going to be walls built up, and it's going to push you farther and farther apart. And that's what happens, I think, a lot with a lot of relationships is people grow apart because they don't try to enhance the intimacy and sustain closeness, and they don't show respect for one another. Times are different. I have an aunt who passed away probably 20 years ago, and she'd be 100 and something now. But her husband beat her, and it was okay back then. It was accepted, and she had nowhere to go. So their marriage maintained and lasted, but it wasn't a close marriage, and he didn't respect her. But she felt that she was trapped in that situation. Luckily, people don't feel that way as much now. So, you need to show respect and consideration for the people in your family. And don't sweat the small stuff. There's a lot of little things that can irritate you. Didn't put the lid on the tube of toothpaste. Or my wife's biggest pet peeve for years was not putting the toilet paper on the right way. You'll get over those. The little things add up, and if you sweat them and you let them build up and let them build up, then it's just going to ruin the family dynamic. It's going to ruin the relationship. My son would get pissed off at somebody, and he'd be fussing about it for days. It's like, why do you let that guy live in your head? What do you mean? I said, you're letting him live rent free in your head, affecting your life every day when all you say is da 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 da. I said, let it go. Don't sweat the small stuff. If you let something bother you and bother you and bother you and bother you, it's going to build up. So let the small stuff go. So in essence, folks, that is chapter 12. I hope that my little stories and everything else made it easier to understand some of the stuff. Families, communication, interpersonal communication, it is something key to your happiness in the rest of your life. If you don't know how to interpersonally communicate, it will make your life difficult. If you know how and you understand you will be much more able to handle the situations that arise. Many of you are going to get married, have families, have kids. Many of you aren't. It's your choice. But regardless of what goes on, you're still part of a family. And in that family, you need to know how to handle the different dynamics. I hope it was well. I'm looking forward to reading your papers at the end of the semester. Y'all have a wonderful day. And if you got any problems or complaints or questions, please feel free to let me know. Y'all take care. It was a pleasure. Bye bye.